If you really believe that God is the one who's made you sick, if He's the source of that sickness or disease, why would you take medicine and try and get out of God's will? Why would you resist? Why not just let it have its full course in your life? Of course, that's not the right approach. Stay tuned for the gospel truth.
Welcome to Gospel Truth with Andrew Wommack, a teaching ministry emphasizing God's unconditional love and grace. And now, here's Andrew.
Welcome to our Wednesday's broadcast of the gospel truth. I'm continuing to teach on God's kind of love. In the first 4 days of last week that I taught on this, I was just talking about how important the love of God is. And ever since Friday of last week, I've been talking about, or I guess a better way to say it, I've been teaching against a wrong sovereignty of God teaching. I think that people blaming God for every terrible thing that happens in the world and saying that God is the author of all of the maladies and the tragedies that hit the human race is just a love killer. And I've used a lot of examples. I would love to go back and say all of those things again, but I've been sharing a lot of things from Scripture. If you've missed any of this teaching, please get the materials that we're offering, especially this teaching on understanding sovereignty. Because if you miss it in this area, you are not going to walk in a real revelation of God's love for you. To ascribe to God things that the devil has done is going to cause confusion and cause a lot of problems in your life. You know, I was told when I was 12 years old that the pastor of the church came over on an Easter Sunday morning and told me that God needed your dad in heaven more than you needed him. And you know what? As a 12-year-old boy, I didn't really even understand exactly what he was saying, but I remember my first thought was, why would God need my dad? Man, I need my dad. He was crediting my dad's death at the age of 54 to God. And there's people that do this. They think, well, nobody could die if it wasn't God's will. That's not true. If you put a gun to a person's head and pull the trigger and you kill them, I guarantee you it wasn't God's will for them to die that way. And yet we can choose whether we cooperate with God's will or whether we go against it. And if it wasn't that way, well, then God would be totally unjust to ever hold anybody accountable for anything, because after all, they couldn't have done it if it wasn't God's will. That just doesn't make sense. And, you know, I've been teaching on this out of James chapter 1. I've already covered verses 2 through 4. I've spent quite a bit of time talking about that. And I've already used this verse, but I want to begin there and continue on. James chapter 1 in verse 13. The context, or let me back up to verse 12. It's still talking about hardships and how if you stand through hardships, you're going to be better off because of it. So in verse 12 it says, "Blessed is the man that endureth temptation, for when he is tried, he will receive the crown of life which the Lord hath promised to them that love him." I don't disagree with that. I just disagree with saying that God sends those temptations. God is not the author of temptation. And that's what the next verse says. It makes it very clear. Verse 13, "Let no man say when he is tempted, I am tempted of God, for God cannot be tempted with evil, neither tempteth he any man." Some people stumble over this because the word tempt is used over in like Genesis 22, that God did tempt Abraham. Actually, it's better translated test, but this doesn't say that God doesn't test us. It just says He doesn't test us with evil. God will put choices in front of us to see what we're going to do and to give us a choice and to mature us, but He doesn't ever tempt us with evil, is what this verse says. But put these two verses together. Verse 12 says, "Blessed is the man that endureth temptation." You're going to be better off if you endure it, persevere through it, and use your faith. I agree with that 100%. I just disagree with somebody saying God is the source of that temptation. And the next verse, you put this together with it. These two verses are back to back. One is verse 12. The other one is verse 13, because they are a continuous thought. It says, "Let no man say when he is tempted, I am tempted of God," or that this temptation is from God. God is not the author of your temptation. God is not the author of your sickness, the author of your disease, the author of your divorce, the author of your bankruptcy. God is not the one who is causing problems in your life. Now, I like to blame the devil for everything I can blame the devil for. I have no love for the devil whatsoever. So I'm ready to just dump on him and trash him any way that I possibly can. And it is true that Satan is behind a tremendous amount of negative things. You know, some of these people who murder their own children and do these terrible things, I believe it has to be demonic. You have to be demon-possessed to be able to do stuff like that. So I'm saying that a lot of tragedy, a lot of bad things going on is demonically inspired. And I agree with that. But you know what? I don't even believe we can blame everything on the devil. With some things, the devil taught you how to act selfish, how to lust, how to lie, how to do things. He taught you these certain things, and then he can go on vacation because you are doing a bang-up job of destroying your own life. You know what? I don't think we can even blame everything on the devil. Some of it, we are giving him a lot of cooperation. And so it's a combination of these two. Either Satan is inspiring and it's just a totally demonic attack, or it could just be people living carnally, putting themselves above other people. And that's the reason they steal and they lie and they hurt other people, is because they don't care about anybody but themselves. But don't say that God is the source of all of these problems. God is not the one who is abusing children, and God is not the one who inspires pedophiles and inspires adulterers, and inspires people to murder their own babies, and inspires people to kill people and to do all of the terrible things that we see. And it grates on me. It makes me mad in a godly, righteous way for people to talk about my Father and discredit him that way. You know, I love my wife. And my wife is a great woman, and I love her, and we got a great relationship, but she's not perfect. She's not God. But she's a good woman. And I guarantee you, if you came and started saying about my wife the things that people say about God, it would offend me. It would make me not want to have you to be one of my best friends if you blame my wife for all of the terrible tragedies and things that were going on. And in a similar way, I can guarantee you my God is a good God. He goes on to say down here in verse 16, James 1:16, do not err, my beloved brethren. In other words, if you aren't going to say what he's about to say in the next verse, you are erring. And religion today is teaching things contrary to this next verse, so they are erring. I'm not against people, I'm just against error, and I'm saying there's a lot of error in religion today, Christian religion, that is blaming God for all of the tragedies that are coming to pass in this world. In verse 16, do not err, my beloved brethren. Every good gift and every perfect gift is from above and cometh down from the Father of lights, with whom is no variableness, neither shadow of turning. That means that God is the author of good gifts. And if you are saying that he's the author of the bad things that are happening to us, you're erring. And it goes on to say that in him there is no shadow of turning or variableness. That means that he doesn't deviate from this. This is the way that he is. God is a good God. The devil is a bad devil. Somebody right now is thinking, well, now wait a minute. Are you saying that all of the things in the Old Testament, such as the flood that came and destroyed all but 8 people on the earth, and when he struck people with leprosy and with the botch and with the mildew, and a death angel went out and killed all of these people, are you saying that God didn't do those things? No, God did those things in the Old Covenant, but it was judgment. You can't find a single instance where those things were done to make a person better. They were done as wrath and punishment upon people. And there was a place for that before people could be born again. Like during the flood, people couldn't be born again. Their nature couldn't be changed. So once they had given themselves over to bestiality and homosexuality and perversions of all kind, they were like a cancer in a body. And even though it's a terrible thing to do to a leg or something, if you had your leg infested with a cancer, it would be mercy to the body as a whole to cut that leg off, amputate it, to keep that disease from spreading. It would be judgment upon the leg, but it would be mercy upon the body. Well, in a sense, since people couldn't be changed under the old covenant the way that they are under the new covenant and become new creatures, God had to just cut this cancer out. He was bringing swift judgment. It was like a primitive form of medicine where you just cut those things out. And so there was wrath and judgment. But in the new covenant, God placed His wrath, His judgment upon Jesus. And for the new covenant believer, God is not going to hit you with the botch and mildew and hemorrhoids and cancers and send a death angel to destroy you, because we've been redeemed from those things. Even in the old covenant, God was doing these things out of love. May not have looked that way to the part that was being amputated, but as a whole, it was love upon the human race to get rid of these vile people who had just given themselves over to demon possession. You had to eradicate them, burn them out like some kind of a plague. You know, that's a real quick explanation of a large subject. But in a sense, that's what was going on. And today, God is the author of good things, and He does not change. There is no variableness. And if you don't understand this, if you go to blaming God and thinking that God is controlling everything that goes on in your life the way that religion is teaching that He does, then you aren't going to really love God. You aren't going to want to get real close to a person who's liable to give you cancer because he loves you so much. He's liable to make you a quadriplegic because that's His love gift to you. Boy, you'll run from a person like that, and that's what a lot of people are doing with God, and it's because the Lord has been misrepresented. I'm standing here saying that God is the author of good gifts and perfect gifts, and there's no variableness, and there's no shadow of turning. God is a good God, and if the God you're serving isn't a good God, you need to go to the Word of God and find out the God of the Bible and go to serving Him. I'm going to take a break here because it's really important that you get this teaching. The things that I'm saying are just so different than what most people are saying. You need to get this teaching and go over it and over it. So please listen as our announcer gives you some information. Please call or write today and get these materials, and then I'll be right back after this break.
Andrew's 5-part teaching titled God's Kind of Love to You is available on CD for a gift of 16 pounds or more. Or you can receive the album as part of the God's Kind of Love 5-pack for a gift of 60 pounds or more. The 5-pack includes God's Kind of Love to You, God's Kind of Love through you, and God's Kind of Love, the cure for what ails you. The companion teachings, The True Nature of God, and Spirit, Soul, and Body are included, and you can choose them on book or CD. Request God's Kind of Love 5-pack when you write, call, or go to our website. Be sure to specify the companion teachings in book or CD. The second individual CD in the God's Kind of Love to You album is available for a donation of £3. But to those unable to send a gift, Andrew and his partners will provide this second CD free of charge. We hope to hear from you today. And now, Gospel Truth continues.
So I've been saying that God is not the author of the negative, tragic things that happen in this world. It's either the devil directly, or it's our own carnal natures that are just operating in selfishness and doing things and hurting other people because we're carnal. It's some of those things, but it is not God. God is not the author of the terrible things that happen in your life. And if you don't understand that, it's going to hinder you walking in love with God. It's amazing how religion has got us. People will sit there and say, oh yes, God loves me, and in the next breath, they think that because they didn't do their daily Bible readings, they forgot to read the Bible one morning, God's liable to let them have cancer to teach them something. Boy, you know, that's just not very good. You know what this reminds me of is people who were raised in an abusive home where the parents would say, oh, I love you, and then they'd slap them, knock them across the room, beat them, burn them with cigarettes, sexually abuse them, verbally abuse them, not feed them, not treat them right, and then turn around and say, I love you. I guarantee you that's going to cause damage in a child if that's the way that you were raised up. And in a sense, that's what religion is doing. Instead of teaching about God the Father, who is a loving, kind Father, and making a good comparison, religion basically is teaching about the Godfather. Similar to that old movie, you know, where Guido comes around and says, there's a lot of arson in this place. There's a lot of, robbery going on. People have been getting mugged. Terrible things are happening. It's a bad neighborhood. But if you will just pay me, I will protect you. And of course, Guido is the one who's doing all of the arson and the beating up. And so what it is, it's this old Godfather type of thing where you pay for protection. And there's a lot of people that's their concept of God. They give tithes because if I'll give this tithe, God, now rebuke the devourer. Don't destroy me. Don't curse me because I've paid my, 10%. I've bought your protection. They're following the Godfather, not God the Father. Religion has misrepresented God. And so that's terrible. Here's another good reason over in James chapter 4. It's in the same book, verse 7. It says, submit yourselves therefore to God. Resist the devil, and he will flee from you. This says submit to that which is of God and resist that which is of the devil. The word resist means to actively fight against. Resist is a hard word. It's talking about hatred, fighting, pushing against. And yet, with most of the ways that people teach on the sovereignty of God, you couldn't resist sickness because it might be God. You couldn't resist poverty. You couldn't resist divorce. You couldn't resist anything because, after all, none of these things could have happened if God didn't allow it. So if you go to resisting and fighting against it, you'd actually be fighting against God. You know, if you believe that God controls everything, then it would just totally render you passive to where there is no reason to pray about anything because nothing could have happened to you unless it was God's will. If you are really going to believe in the sovereignty of God, if you're going to ignore everything that I've said, everything that the Bible says, and you're just going to stand by this religious doctrine that God controls everything, nothing can happen without it being God's will, and it was given to perfect you so that you could be perfect and entire, a misapplication of James chapter 1, verse 4. If you are going to believe that, then to be consistent, when the doctor tells you you've got cancer, why would you fight against it? Because God gave it to you. It couldn't have happened if it wasn't His will. And He's doing it to make you perfect. So why would you try and get out of His will? Why would you take medicine? Why would you go to the doctor and let them cut out this cancer? Why would you let them irradiate it, give you chemotherapy? Why would you do anything to get out of God's will? If it's God's will, then stay in God's will and learn the thing. I mean, suffer. Don't take any painkillers and let the pain have its full work in your life. Now, hopefully you understand that I am not advocating you doing that, but I'm saying that would be consistent with the doctrine that says God is the one who gave that to you. If God really gave it to you, then any attempt for you to change your situation is resisting God. The Bible here says, submit yourselves to that which is God. Resist that which is of the devil. That shows that some things are of God, some things are of the devil. You submit, yield to that which is of God, and you fight against that which is of the devil. People who teach an extreme sovereignty of God, there is nothing of the devil. Even the devil. I actually heard a guy say the devil is Satan is God's messenger boy. If you believe in this extreme sovereignty, Satan has to get permission to do anything, so it's like he's on a leash. The Lord is only letting him bite you because it serves his purpose. That's what people teach with the sovereignty of God. I tell you, that's terrible. That's terrible, and what it does is render you passive, and if these scriptures are true, which they are, that says you resist the devil, and he will flee from you, not flee from God. You can't ask God to resist the devil for you. He told you to resist him. If all of that be true, which it is, then that means if this sovereignty of God doctrine has gotten you to where you are yielded to your problems and saying, God, if it's your will, take it away, but I'm willing to suffer and take all of these things, then you know what? Satan won't flee because he has to flee from you. It's God's power in you, but you are the one that has to resist, and then God causes him to flee through you. And if you are submitted to this and embracing your problems because of a wrong understanding and thinking that God is using these terrible things to make you a better person, then you're going to die. You're going to be destroyed by those problems. And brothers and sisters, I see this happening. And it breaks my heart to see this. You know, I've been there. At one time, I guess one of the reasons I'm so adamant against this teaching is because I have been there. I have believed this and I've taught it. And I've already given this example in more detail, but there was a girl that she was my girlfriend, and when I got drafted and sent to Vietnam, I actually had her parents say that she was engaged to me. We had talked about it, but we hadn't exchanged rings or anything. I was unofficially engaged to her, and they got me an emergency leave from Vietnam to come home because she had leukemia. And you know how she got it? Through this teaching on the sovereignty of God. I brought home a series of tapes from a meeting that I attended where a man taught that Satan is God's messenger boy. And he gave an example of a guy who tried to witness and he was just too bashful. Nobody would listen. And so this guy, because of wrong teaching, says, God, if it's your will, give me cancer so that as I suffer and die from cancer and show them that I'm not afraid to die, that I could be a witness that way. And so he prayed that God would give him cancer. The next morning he woke up and had leukemia. And he went through a terrible ordeal. He died. At his funeral, 4 people got born again. I brought that series home, gave it to this girl. She listened to it, and she prayed that exact same prayer and said, God, give me leukemia if that will bring glory to you so that people can see my testimony. The next day, she woke up and she had acute leukemia. She passed out. They rushed her to the hospital, and she was diagnosed. And I got to come home, and we had her anointed with oil, and we prayed, and we were asking God to heal her of this on one hand, and yet on the other hand, she prayed and asked God for it. And I'm not to condemn her. I was believing the same thing. It was just wrong. But you know what? God didn't answer that prayer. God didn't give her leukemia. Satan takes advantage of things like that. That's just like throwing open the door. And you may be sitting there, oh, God, give me cancer. But God's not going to give you cancer. But Satan will walk through that door. Satan will take advantage of that. And I was with that girl when she strangled to death. She hemorrhaged and choked on her own blood. We stood there and prayed for her to be raised from the dead. Did what we knew how to do. But you know what undid all of the faith we were trying to release? It was the fact over here that we believed God was sovereign, and we were praying, Lord, if it's your will. And we were strong in expressing what our desire was, but we had no faith, no authority that we could do anything about it, because after all, it was God's will. And it must have been God's will that all this happened. And her parents and everybody else involved in that situation, after they saw what happened, and she was such a godly girl, and we tried so hard that everybody just said, well, it must not be God's will to heal every person, every time. And I went to the Word and I said, no, right here. It says, I wish above all things that you prosper and be in health, even as your soul prospers. 3 John verse 2, and many other scriptures. And I said, this is what God's Word said. And they said, but here is our experience. And they all backed away from healing. And you know what? I actually lost fellowship with a lot of those people for a period of time because I just said no. God did not kill this girl. And they said, so are you blaming God? And I said, no, I don't know who to blame, but I just know that a loving God did not kill this 16-year-old girl. And you know what? Everybody was trying to tell me that it was God's love that killed her. No. It was our stupidity that killed her, that opened up a door, and then the devil came in and took advantage of that. And you know what? I'm to blame. I'm the one that shared that with her. I'm not here to criticize anybody else. I'm not trying to condemn you, but I am saying that this is critical. This is really important, the things that I'm talking about. And if you don't understand it, if you don't resist the devil, if you don't learn what's of God and submit to it, and learn what's of the devil and resist it, if you ever get those things confused and you go to submitting to the devil thinking that it's God, I guarantee you, you're signing your own death warrant, whether it's physical, emotional, in finances, or whatever. You need to find out a proper understanding of the sovereignty of God. And I've still got more to share on this, and so I'm going to be on this again tomorrow. I encourage you to listen in then, and also listen as our announcer gives you information about how you can get this single teaching on understanding sovereignty, and then the album on God's Kind of Love to You, and then also our God's Kind of Love 5-pack. Listen as our announcer gives you this information, and then join me again tomorrow for the Gospel Truth.
Andrew's 5-part teaching titled God's Kind of Love to You is available on CD for a gift of 16 pounds or more. Or you can receive the album as part of the God's Kind of Love 5-pack for a gift of 60 pounds or more. The 5-pack includes God's Kind of Love to You, God's Kind of Love through You, and God's Kind of Love, the cure for what ails you. The companion teachings, The True Nature of God, and Spirit, Soul, and Body are included, and you can choose them on book or CD. Request God's Kind of Love 5-pack when you write, call, or go to our website. Be sure to specify the companion teachings in book or CD. The second individual CD in the God's Kind of Love to You album is available for a donation of £3. But to those unable to send a gift, Andrew and his partners will provide this second CD free of charge.
I know that many of you are just really bearing witness. I can just imagine some of you standing up and cheering. Because you know what? This needs to be said, and I'm trying to say it as loud and cover as much territory with it as I possibly can. In the United States, we're now covering around 60% of the population, but I have a desire to make this truth available to everybody. Not everybody will accept it, but many will. And I'd just like to ask you to help me get this truth out. It's really dependent upon whether or not you help us as to how far we can go with this gospel. So we have a number on your screen. Please call. Please become a partner with us in getting out the good news of God's love.
Our address is AWME. That's Andrew Wommack Ministries of Europe, P.O. Box 4392, Walsall, WS1 9AR, England. Our telephone number is 01922 473 300. Or you can go to our website at any hour. You can use credit card to make donations and receive ministry products 24 hours a day at www.awme.net. Thank you for your gift today. We also would like to point out Andrew's upcoming speaking schedule. All meetings are open to the public and no registration is required for these events. Visit our website or call our helpline for more information. Mark your calendar and come meet Andrew at one of these events. Tune in tomorrow for more gospel truth.
Satan's purpose in your life is to steal, to kill, and to destroy. If it fits into one of those categories, it's the devil. It's not God, it's the devil. And the James 4:7 says, resist the devil, and he will flee from you. You got to fight against these things. And then Jesus came to give us life and to give it to us more abundantly, not just a tiny bit of life, just enough to keep us surviving, but no, an abundant life. If it's not abundant life, it's not God.
That's tomorrow on Gospel Truth with Andrew Wommack.